Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. When I said in my last video that Tottenham fans just can't have nice things? Wow. Selhurst Park, what an absolute disaster that was yesterday. It was a performance that stank out London, essentially. It was awful. The amount of times I've been to Selhurst Park before and watched, pretty much tight games, but Spurs on the whole coming out on top, couple of draws, but mostly, 1-0 wins. Oh, this was something different. It was absolutely appalling. Right up there with among the worst Tottenham performances I've seen, and obviously I've seen very, very, very many up close. What I would say is, of course, Spurs are still 4 games into a Premier League season. Nuno and Tottenham were top of the table. Nuno was manager of the month. 2 hours later, the world had ended. I saw on social media, and this, I understand it, I get it, because my goodness, we're so passionate about football and our teams or team. But yes, Tottenham were top of the table. Nuno manager of the month. 2 hours later, Nuno out. That was what I saw. I actually saw that on Twitter. Nuno out, and it's awful. Even the wins were lucky. Oh my goodness, he'll be gone by October, and that was kind of general theme. And Tottenham are, when will people realise they're just a mid-table rubbish team? And it's like, I get it. It works both ways. Sometimes after defeats, we feel the very, very worst. Sometimes after wins, we feel probably far too much in the other direction. And hopefully that's where I come in. As you know, anyone that's read my stuff or watched my stuff, I try to look at both sides of the coin. That's hopefully where I come in. And, what I'd say, because I'm going to be very critical of Tottenham and what they did yesterday, very critical in what I'm about to say. But what I should temper that with, and I'd hope most people are doing that, and it may just be the aftermath of a very painful, just rubbish defeat. What I would say is, look, it's still so early to judge a head coach, manager, whatever you want to call him, trying to set out his style of football and what he wants them to play. And and I think that even that goes for the 3 matches that were won as well. It's exactly the same. We don't really know what the Nuno Espirito Santo Tottenham is going to look like yet. I said this before, even in the wins, he still wasn't happy. He still wanted more. He still felt there was more to come. And yes, I'm going to talk about how even that juxtaposes with the team selection yesterday, which, was pretty mind-boggling. It was, although I'm going to seek to try to understand it and kind of go inside it a little bit. But yeah, what I'd say about Nuno, for the people that have, I've already seen have decided that, and I get it, because a lot of people felt that he was the wrong choice, and certainly you would have heard me speak about how I was surprised that he was there, and for me, I didn't quite feel that he fitted the profile of what was coming as well. And I'm certainly not excusing myself from that as well. I was very much of that. But as I said before, there's a point for me. Maybe it's just a professional thing as a journalist. I don't know. Maybe as fans, we don't have to do that. But I have to kind of hit a reset, and I have to look at it, and I have to look at what he's done before at other clubs, and then make a decision based on what I see happen at Tottenham. I don't feel I've had enough time, if we were scientists and we were looking at a set amount of time to develop our theory. God, that was nerdy, wasn't it? I don't think we've had enough experiment time yet to see a big enough sample, I think is what I'm trying to grasp for the expression there. Because, what he's had so far, he started the season essentially pretty much without his star player, with all the Harry Kane mess. We're now finally seeing Harry Kane kind of back in action, starting games, but it's quite clear to see this isn't a Harry Kane that's sharp yet in any way, shape or form. And yes, Harry Kane's going to get a little bit of criticism to come later on from me for yesterday. And I think, look, let's be honest, yesterday, missing Son, Bergwijn, the Celso, the big summer signing Romero for the defence, Davinson Sanchez. You can throw in Ryan Sessegnon if you want, although it probably wasn't going to play a part yesterday. But either way, the bulk of the other players they're all available. That result probably doesn't happen. Let's be honest. The likelihood it doesn't happen. The likelihood is probably Spurs win. I'd go as far to say. So yes, I was told. I understand that Nuno was pretty pissed off this week. He's been really unhappy with everything that happened over the international break. Not just the mess with the players who are now stuck in Croatia, the South Americans, but also the injuries players come back with. Essentially Son has been probably one of his shining lights. And I think Bergwijn, apart from the end product, has also been. I think he's been a real kind of key, tenant to what to what Spurs have been doing this season. I think with the way he's not only working hard but also making things happen in the final third for others as well. And I think just taking those two, literally taking those two players out. And yes, I know some fans will go, oh, but that shows why it should have been a better transfer window. Squad should be bigger, blah, blah, blah. And I get that. Completely get that. You would have heard me say last week or the week before, whenever I did it, the transfer window wrap, that I felt there should have been a little bit more done in the window. And I agree with that. But what I would also say is if you take all of those players out of your team and have an unfit, or I suppose unfit, not sharp star player, any squad is going to struggle. Anyone, even Man City, if you take that many of probably starters. I mean, let's say Son, Bergwijn and Sanchez would have all started. Romero is going to be at the stage soon where he will be starting every match. And Lo Celso could have started yesterday. Maybe would have started that game instead of Winks. Maybe it depends. But either way, my point is, there were players there that would have made a huge difference to that game and didn't. And so, I don't think we're at the stage yet where we can say, oh, it's terrible this, it's terrible that. I don't think there's a big enough sample size. I will always point towards Poch. Poch, pretty much we didn't see where that team was going and what he wanted to do with it until the Villa game, which was it October, November? He'd really been struggling to put his imprint on Tottenham by that point. Obviously we know about the cliques within the team. He just decided after that Villa game that a lot of the older players were essentially going to be pushed to the wayside. We saw Yunus Kabul, Emmanuel Adebayor, even Aaron Lennon, players like that started to get slightly pushed. Although, to be fair to Lennon, I think he still played a fair bit that season. But the older players started to get kind of pushed towards the fringes, and he brought this younger core, and then it became the Poch Tottenham we know. But I think if we'd all judged Poch after 4 Premier League games, I think it could have been disastrous. He could have gone. I think he even felt he might have gone before that if he'd lost that Villa game. But it works both ways, and I'm not absolutely saying that Nuno Espirito Santo will be a huge success. We don't know yet. It's the same with Mourinho. I did exactly the same with Mourinho. I wanted to give him time to actually have his imprint. And like I said, although I still feel there were a few extenuating circumstances, I felt by the end of the Mourinho era, we hadn't seen enough. That was long enough to show that his Tottenham wasn't going to happen. But 4 games in, I'm certainly not going to be joining Nuno out or any of that sort of stuff right now. It's far, far, far too early to judge. However, if we're going to just take yesterday's game in isolation, it was absolutely horrific. I thought the team selection was just strange. I mean, let me give you an Opta stats, right? Spurs only managed 2 shots, not even off target, on target, 2 shots during the whole game. And that was their lowest total of shots in a Premier League game since a match against Blackburn Rovers in 2005. That's how bad it was from attacking sense. It was awful. The performance stank. It really did. And I think Nuno knew it. He did know it because I asked him about it afterwards, and he just said it was so poor. The team lineup for me, it all started kind of from that moment. Look, I know, like I said, Nuno wasn't the happiest man. His press conference on the Friday was rubbish, let's be honest. It was. I've said to you before, I felt his press conferences have been really good. I think he's been on a bit of a charm offensive. I felt his press conference on Friday, ahead of the match, was very much a man who just was fed up and didn't want to be there. And I'd seen some of those under Poch, so I know what they look like. And he was just, every question was met with a very general answer, very much It's about all the players. Even like a simple question I asked him, one of the questions I asked was about Brian Hill, and it was just like, is he ready for the Premier League yet to start? Do you feel the physical side? And he went, all the players are ready to start. It's a bit like, oh, okay, no, that's what we're going to do. And I just kind of felt almost like that whole attitude just permeated throughout this performance. There was almost a bit of woe is me, where we're beaten, not well, or not we're beaten, but we're not going to win almost before it started. I felt the team lineup hugely reflected that. I'm sorry, but there's no game where you should need Harry Winks, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, and Oliver Skipp all in the same lineup. You just shouldn't. And with no disrespect for them, as the results showed, they clearly cannot be disrespected. But to go to a place like Crystal Palace and afford them the respect of 3 defensive midfielders, I'm sorry, but it's like, I don't know if any of you watch, or you probably do, or hopefully do because I love it, the American version of The Office. There's a scene in one of the episodes where Michael Scott is driving Dwight Schrute. I think they've just been to a sales call or something, and the GPS, sat-nav, whatever you want to call it, is telling Michael Scott to drive forward, and Dwight's going, no, there's a lake. And he's like, no, I've got to do it. That's what the GPS said. And he just drives straight into this lake. And that's kind of what this team lineup felt like. It was like, we all saw before the match, it's like, really? Where's the creativity coming from? What? And it was almost like Nuno saw it. I asked him afterwards, I said, were you concerned about the creativity? And he said, yes, it was a big concern. And it was a bit like, you picked 3 defensive midfielders. And I'm just wondering if that was his Michael Scott moment of, I've got to stick to this, I've got to stick to this, I've got to stick to this. Oh, no, the lake. And it was a bit like, just what is happening? It was so bad. And just not to change it at all. I'm just wondering whether, I think, in trying to understand the formation, I looked at it and I was thinking perhaps the idea is that the fullbacks then get freed up and they get to, you've got 2 attacking fullbacks in Emerson, or, Emerson his reputation in Spain is maybe more defensive, but certainly Nuno sees him as an attacking fullback. And you've got Reguilon on the other side. So my thinking was, okay, so what he's doing is he's going to allow those 2 players to essentially be wingers and try to pin back Zaha and, get up the pitch. And it was Skip in the middle and Højbjerg on one side and Winks on the other. And then Højbjerg and Winks would cover for the 2 fullbacks who would then become wingers. They'd be able to get right up there, pin them up, essentially act as wingers to provide the width for then, Kane, Lucas and Ali in the middle to profit from the crosses. It just didn't happen. The fullbacks were dreadful going forward. Absolutely dreadful. The worst I've seen Reguilon go forward. I'm going to talk about his defending a little bit later, which I felt was a little bit different, but his attacking, his ball distribution, his decision-making was horrendous. And Emerson, again, we're going to talk about him a bit later, so I won't go too much now. But essentially the fullbacks just did nothing of what would have made maybe that system work. It was just dreadful. I was trying to understand the logic of bringing Harry Winks in ahead of, let's say, Brian Hill or Tanguy Ndombele. And I was trying to think, I wonder when it comes to Ndombele, whether he just thought to himself, look, Ndombele wanted to leave the club. Harry Winks didn't, despite interest in him. I feel I maybe owe it to him to play him. Like to send a message to the squad that, you should be rewarded for wanting to be here. But even that, for me, it's about making a decision that's best for the team, not best for sending a message, if you see what I mean. Do you know what I mean? I just wonder whether there was a stubbornness in the team selection, which I hope. Look, I'm hopeful that this was just a blip, and it was a match where circumstances conspired to a degree. Manager just made a bad decision with the team lineup, and then not changing it at the game, or kind of, I suppose, in some aspects being forced into changes that weren't the ones he wanted. But I just felt, especially, what I think about Ndombele, and I just can't see how you could look at that match and not feel that either Hill or Ndombele would have changed it for the better. And I'd say from the starting lineup as well. It was like a team that was set up to work hard when you didn't need that many workers. You needed someone with a bit of oomph, a little bit more to their game. And yeah, I think just when the final whistle went, or when I was just watching the lack of creativity, it made me think back to at the end of the was it Watford match? Yeah, when you saw Daniel Levy up in the stands smiling away because for him, he felt his decision had been vindicated. Tottenham at top of the league, everything going very well, and I would love to see what his face was like yesterday because it just made me think back to. You'd have heard me say this in videos and write about it as well that in the summer, Daniel Levy was not entirely sold on Nuno Espirito Santo. There was a fear that, and obviously it was prevalent on social media last night, that Nuno was potentially a Mourinho 2.0, but obviously without the silverware. So Levy was very much like undecided when Paratici wanted to bring in bringing him in. So what happened was Paratici showed Levy videos of Nuno's Valencia team, specifically. I think it was the first season in La Liga when they were superb. They swept to fourth place in the table. They were very, very, very good and played some really nice attacking football as well. And that essentially sold Levy on Nuno Espirito Santo. And I just wonder whether yesterday afternoon, he was just watching the game like, oh no, kind of like, oh my God, this is exactly what I feared. Like I've said, I'm hopeful that we just haven't seen the proper Nuno team yet. But decisions like yesterday just don't help. With Tongi, look, whatever you want to say about Tongi, I know there's some people that are very unhappy with the way he was this summer, and I don't think he covered himself in any glory whatsoever. But he brings something Tottenham didn't have yesterday. He can dribble past people, he can break the lines, he can keep the ball, he can thread balls through, he can arrive in the box and score as well. He is, he's a special player, he is. Whatever you say about his attitude, his focus, his fitness, whatever you want to say about those things, the rest of his game, the natural talents he has make him special. And for a guy that has been training in pre-season since he came back from becoming a dad, and especially the last fortnight at least, when he knew a move wasn't going to happen, and he was fully. He's spoken to Nuno. They very much have had chats. I asked him about that, and Nuno's very much. I talked to all the players because he was in that kind of mood on Friday. But we know he's had positive chats with Tongi. So Tongi, I'm sorry, there is no way Tongi, with all the training he's been doing, whatever the lack of competitive minutes, there's no way he was not fit enough to start that game or even make some kind of contribution during it. And even Brian Hill. Brian Hill, he's got that little bit of something. He's got that bit of creativity. He wants to make things happen. And there were two occasions when he was about to bring him on. And I think there's a Twitter account, isn't it? It's like images that precede disaster or something like that. I can't remember what it is. And I kind of felt like I was tweeting that as well. Every time was twice. Two occasions I tweeted, Brian Hill is set to come on. Something rubbish happened a minute later for Spurs. First time was the red card. And the second one, I think, was the penalty. I think it was. I think that was the order. But it was stubborn. Even I look at that bench and even young Dylan Markindale, who has been phenomenal for Tottenham's development squad. Even he, that sounds dismissive. It's not meant to be. It's just purely because of his age and he hasn't even, made his debut for Spurs yet. But even a guy who hasn't made his debut for Spurs yet, I felt would have added something to that team yesterday. And to kind of not even make a third sub, it almost just felt like admitted. Like I say, I'm going to go back to the Michael Scott GPS into the lake. It was very much like, we must continue on this current course. And it was just, I'll be really intrigued to see what he learns from this match as well, Nuno. I think he's got a right to be disappointed with some of his players, but I think in terms of his decision-making as well, I'd hope that he will learn because, let's put it this way, if Spurs play anything like that against Chelsea at the Tottenham Hotspur, what will probably be a full Tottenham Hotspur stadium, the atmosphere is going to be horrendous. He just cannot put out that sort of lineup, I'd say ever again. maybe get it out his system. But my word, it was. And like I say, yes, I think some of the players should also step up and take some of it, because I thought the three... No, that's not fair. I'm not going to say the three attacking players apart. I thought Lucas was the one who looked like he was trying to make something happen. He was doing what he does. He was running past players. He was being dynamic. He was trying to make things happen. But just either A, didn't have the end product, or B, there was no movement. The movement, I tweeted about it during the game because it was winding me up. The movement from the attacking players and the other, the three central midfielders, when someone had the ball, was so poor. There was no attempt to get into positions where they would receive the ball. There was a real lack of courage, I'd say. There was a real not showing for the ball, hiding. I saw there was a couple of occasions Emerson was just like doing that with his hands, like, I've got the ball. Who do I pass to? And I just thought to myself, you're a long way from Barcelona now, kid. You really are. Barcelona, it's constant movement, boom, boom, tiki-taka, or whatever you want to call it. It's constantly recycling the ball, getting it to someone else being in a position to pass and move, bum, bum, bum. And it was just like, oh my goodness, there was no one. And to have just two shots, and I just kind of summed up that when they got over the halfway line, there was no idea of what to do with the ball. Dele Alli, I felt, worked hard in his own half. He was, blocking shots, doing stuff in his own box. As soon as he crossed the halfway line, just didn't know what to do with it. And it was almost like he was trying to play the role he's been playing in a deeper position in the first three games, but in this game, when there already were three deeper players. I've always said this about Dele. Dele is not really a creator. He is someone that, if you're going to use him in a deeper role, then it's going to be very much about his breaks into the box, his runs into the box that are undetected. But he won't create chances, really. He's not going to be the king of the assists. That's not what his kind of role is. I thought he was poor, and Harry Kane. I think Harry Kane, I gave my lowest mark in my player ratings alongside Japhet Tanganga, and even Tanganga was unlucky. We'll come to Tanganga. I'm not going to go into Tanganga yet. Tanganga, I'm going to talk about in a little minute, because ultimately for me, he would have been player of the match had it not been for the red card. But Harry Kane. Yes, I suppose if you're going to give him one excuse, it could be it was a quick turnaround from the England match on Wednesday night. Having a lunchtime kickoff on a Saturday, but everyone was international break. I don't think you can use that for one player, but I think that probably the best way I can say it is you probably could have put a cardboard cutout of Harry Kane up front yesterday, and it really wouldn't have made much of a difference. That was how poor he was, and you could quite rightly say there was no service. The service was embarrassing. There was no service into him whatsoever. But what I would say about Harry Kane is we hold Harry Kane to a higher standard, or certainly I do, because as he showed last season, most assists in the Premier League, Harry Kane is also your playmaker. He is also your creator. He's the man that makes things happen as well. And for me, I still will always maintain Harry Kane is world class, but I do wonder whether just the thing that stops him maybe being recognised by everyone in like the top bracket is when you really need him to take a game by the scruff of the neck. Sometimes he's not there. And look, all big players do have games like that. But I just felt yesterday for me was another of those examples, and they crop up sometimes with Harry Kane, where you're just crying out for him just to step up, just to be that man that just says, come on, I'm class, follow what I can do, and I'll do it. Take the ball, set things up. And yes, it may be that Ali and Lucas's runs in front of him were not good enough. There wasn't players to, like I said about the movement, there wasn't enough for him to pass to. But I just feel he's that good. He can be that good, Harry Kane, that really, we have seen him do it before. He can take games where Spurs are struggling and just create something out of nothing. Even if it's a shot from distance, like you saw against Poland for England. He can just make things suddenly happen. I just felt yesterday, it was just non-existent. I mean, it was the first time in his, career, I think it may have even been, certainly in the Premier League, but I think maybe his career, where he had not touched the ball in the opposition box once, or even had a shot in a game where he's played 90 minutes in. That says it all. absolutely says it all. You know, I mean, some people will probably say, "Oh, he's just so upset he didn't get his move," and it's psychologically he's not there. I just think we just haven't. He's just not sharp yet. I don't think the start of the season helped him in any way. I think he needs minutes under his belt. I don't know whether he'll play against Rennes in midweek, but for me, I think he should, because I think he needs maybe an hour just to find his sharpness again. Even for England, I don't think he looked particularly sharp at all. And Spurs need him to be sharp. Like I said earlier with Nuno's start to the season, I think Tottenham with Harry Kane in it, whatever, I've seen some people going down this line of Spurs are better without Harry Kane. They're not. You've just kind of seen scenarios where it's worked for them because of just the team they were playing or something. Harry Kane is one of the best players in the world. But I'd apply that to a sharp and fit and fully focused Harry Kane. And, Poch's team had a lot of terrific players in it, but ultimately it was at its best really when Harry Kane was flying. Same with Mourinho. Kane pulled Mourinho out of a lot of tough holes, I think, in matches. And, he will do the same for Nuno. But yesterday, my word, it was so poor. And he cannot have gone away from that game blaming others. I think he has to blame himself as well. I can't just keep talking about negatives, otherwise it's going to be the most depressing video ever. I'm going to talk about some positives, and I think the defending, and this sounds utterly ridiculous in a 3-0 defeat, but please do bear with me. I think for a long period, the defending within the circumstances was good, especially as we're talking about a very young defence. What happened with Eric Dyer, oh my goodness, Eric Dyer looked in so much pain. You could tell them immediately after he was limping around, and then I just watched him in front of me kind of walking down the sideline towards the tunnel area. He had one of the sports science guys kind of just with his arm around him trying to help him. He could barely move his leg. I don't know whether it was perhaps a knee injury, we'll find out. It just didn't look good at all. And for that to happen after 12 minutes, obviously it only showed even more so how ridiculous the whole decision for Espirito Santo, for Romero and Sanchez and all that to head off. Look, I know why they did these things, and I know that there's the pride for the country, all of that as well. But just seeing what it did for Spurs and what it did for Romero went there and played 6 minutes. And I think I can understand why in that aspect Nuno is so fed up with what happened, because essentially it was, this is not to dig him out too much, but it was a decision made for themselves rather than what was best for the team. I'm sorry if that sounds really harsh, but I think it kind of was. And I think yesterday kind of showed exactly why that ended up being the case. And, and you ended up having Japhet Tanganga and Joe Rodon thrown together. And Joe Rodon, for a man who did not expect to come into the game after 11, 12 minutes, whatever it was, and who hadn't played competitive minutes for almost 3 months, I thought he actually did really well. I thought as the game wore on a little bit, as the defence kind of got a little bit, especially after the penalty, and the defence just got a little bit ragged around him, he then was trying to make up for others' kind of positional areas, and that kind of got him a bit stuck. I think maybe he played Palace onside maybe for the third goal. But like I say, I wouldn't really say that's his fault. I'd say that that's him trying to make up for the errors of others. I would say he was a positive. I thought Japhet Tanganga, until the red card, was, it was, I thought he was actually, I'd go as far to say he was outstanding. I thought he was really, really superb. A lot of the decision-making, a lot of the interceptions, the tackles, a lot of the way he kind of dealt with Zaha, as Zaha got towards the end of a run was superb. But, just the absolute moment that pulled him apart, really, was when it was the Zaha moment. Ironically, having just said how he kind of dealt with him, he got to this moment where, I'm sure you've seen it, where Lucas Moura was lying kind of stricken on the floor. I think maybe it was Gallagher had just caught the top of his. Oh no, so it was his heel, wasn't it? It looked pretty sore. It really did. And he was lying on the floor. Palace broke up the pitch, and Zaha got away down the left-hand side, and he was flying past. He was about to fly past Tanganga, get into the box, and it probably would have resulted in a goal. So Tanganga did, which is something that, remember Mourinho calling out for his players to do, which was just commit a cynical foul. He did. I think he just kind of used his arm and just essentially went like that. It was cynical as they come. It was yellow card worthy. It was taking one for the team. It was the kind of thing that on 9 out of 10 occasions, it would just be like the crowd would go mad, the player on the floor would go like, referee, and Tanganga's teammates would have patted him on the back and say, cheers for that, you kind of bailed us out. Cynical as they come. And they are incredibly frustrating. But what happened on this occasion was Zaha, which he has a habit of being utterly outraged. He reminds me a little bit of Richarlison in that respect of everything is the worst possible thing that's happened to him. Look, I get it. He probably gets hacked down so much because of the skills he's got. He probably gets taken out so much. But his reaction for me was so over the top. It was incredible. Honestly, he was very lucky. He was swinging his arms around and everything. He was very lucky. Nothing really connected with Tanganga. And there's an image that I use in the story today where he is holding Tanganga by the throat. I presume he's pushing him away. But essentially, Zaha did a lot of the things that I think other players, you could maybe argue would go as far. He got a yellow, maybe. The whole raising hands nature. Like I say, if he connected with any of the swinging he did at the start, I think he might have been off. And what Tanganga did was, if anyone's ever met Tanganga, I've been very fortunate to interview him a few times. He is the quietest guy. He is very well brought up, amazing family around him, very religious guy, talks about religion as well. His face when he saw what Zaha was doing, honestly, it was just like incredible. Hulk kind of almost was switched on. And he did this thing, which even in the moment was actually quite mature, was he just did this, like this kind of bear hug around Zaha and pinned his arms down as if to say, like, stop trying to get me kind of thing. And it was quite clever because he didn't raise his hand. There was no pushing back, anything that could have got him more than a yellow himself. Zaha was just like, there was a moment where you saw Zaha like, whoa, okay, this guy could absolutely take me down. But with Tanganga, the switch had still been flipped. The adrenaline was coursing through him. And although he made the right decision in that moment, you could still see, it was only 5 minutes on. He made a terrific interception, but he was still like absolutely buzzing. You know what it is whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, when the absolute adrenaline is going through your body and just sometimes you make a stupid decision. And that was exactly what he did. He made a great interception, strode out with the ball, tried to pass it to Harry Winks. The ball bounced off Conor Gallagher and just kind of was in that loose area of don't go for it. It's just too far. But his brain it was too much adrenaline coursing through him. Leapt in for the ball, and Ayew got there just first, took him out. And I saw some people saying he didn't deserve the yellow card. He did. I'm sorry. He did. First one was definitely a yellow card because it was a cynical foul. And second one, he went in late and took a guy out. It was a stupid lunge to make. It was. And he will know it. And I just hope that Nuno and he both see a hell of a lot of positives before that. Because, I told you before, Tanganga told me just before the season started that he really did want to play centre-back this season if he could. And I thought, as a centre-back, I thought he was superb. Some people sometimes have concerns about his height, but I felt his spring is so good. He wins a lot of headers. And I just hope that this hasn't ruined his chance to play at centre-back again. Obviously, he'll miss the Chelsea game now. I wouldn't be stunned if... I think he'll have to play against Rennes, probably with Rodon again. But yeah, I just thought it was so unfortunate. And of course, I think the game pretty much for Spurs was heading towards only one conclusion. It might have gone to a 0-0 until the daft kind of penalty incident. But yeah, I thought for me, Rodon and Tanganga, there were positives there. And like I said, I don't want to just say it was a completely negative performance because I think there were. And yes, I know it's weird that I'm saying positives about a guy who got himself sent off, but hopefully you understand what I mean. What else did I want to talk about? The penalty, again, I don't think there was much to complain about. Davies came on, and it was just his arm was up. That was it. It was an unnatural position, and yeah, I don't think there was too much to complain about. And from that moment on, really, Spurs just kind of collapsed, really. And even Lloris, I didn't say in the Dyer incident, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe it was Dyer not expecting the ball. I don't know. But Lloris kind of rolled the ball out a little bit too hard, in my view, past him, which meant Dyer then had to commit himself to that kind of challenge, which was how he injured himself. I mean, I'd have to watch it back. I think I've only seen it back twice. Maybe I haven't watched anything like Match of the Day yet. Maybe I have to look it back and see whether, you may tell me, you very well may do in the comments. People like to tell me their views in the comments, which is great. It may well be that Dyer maybe just wasn't switched on, wasn't expecting it. I can't remember how far away the rollout was from him. I don't want to say that Lloris, was the reason he was injured. He didn't have to then lunge for the ball, I guess. But yeah, Lloris for the third goal should have done better. And of course, there's an irony that Crystal Palace striker they bought came on and scored 2 goals. And you could argue that Spurs really haven't got that attacking option to replace Kane with, when they haven't got Son. And that was shown yesterday. Kane was pretty poor, and there was no one else to replace him. So there was a great photo I used yesterday, where I used it, I think, for my press conference transcript, where Nuno's going like that, but the way he's looking, you've got Paratici and Steve Hitchen in the background in the dugout, and it's almost like going, thanks lads, thanks for the great transfer window. It's a bit like, it totally doesn't mean that, but I just found that quite amusing. Fullbacks, yeah, as I said earlier, Sergio Reguilon I felt very poor going forward, but actually in his defending, I actually felt he had some good moments. There was one really good block in front of his goal, which I think it deflected onto Rodon in a way. There was a terrific header off almost on his goal line of spinning cross. He somehow managed to kind of flick over the crossbar, which was very, very good. Yeah, I thought defensively he wasn't that bad. I just felt that, unfortunately, the key on the day of that whole system was him getting forward, and it just didn't work. Emerson, I felt he started very well, did a lot of good things in the beginning of the game, but as it wore on, you could just see it's a hell of a tricky debut to come up against Zaha. It's not who you want in your first test in the Premier League. I felt some of the stuff I maybe said to you after he signed was slightly borne out. It's only, again, small sample size, only the first game to talk about, but I felt stamina, fitness, the engine he's got was definitely shown to be good. I mean, he lasted the whole game in his debut. But then the flip side, maybe technically, some of the things he did with the ball just showed that little element isn't there, or needs to be developed. And as I said, I was told by a lot of Spanish journalists, 22, very raw, needs a lot of work done. And I think that's fair to say on that first performance. It'd be interesting to see now. I'd imagine Doherty will start against Rennes, but it'd be interesting to see kind of who plays against Chelsea, because well, we're going to talk about who's coming back, but I'll be intrigued to see who gets that spot now against Chelsea, because that's going to be a big role within the team on that day as well. So yeah, it's Rennes up next. Like I say, I think probably Tanganga and Rodon will be in defence because there's no one else, unless he puts a youngster in there like a Pascozzi or Pierre-Emile, I don't know, who was also on the bench yesterday, which was great for him. I think Ndombele and Gill have to start. I think they need minutes in a Tottenham shirt, especially Ndombele, who plays up front. Like I said, I think personally Harry Kane probably needs the minutes, but then do you risk tiring him out for Chelsea? Do you give Dane Scarlett another start to start kind of increasing his development time? Even someone like Dylan Markanday, do they get to come in? I like, there's Jack Clark is there, but you obviously, like, Jack Clark wasn't on the bench yesterday. Markanday was. So does that mean Markanday is now ahead of him? Does Markanday perhaps get some minutes, or maybe even start on Thursday night. We'll see. I'd imagine there will be some youngsters. We've got Sanchez, Romero, and Lo Celso. I asked Nuno about them, and he said they'll come back the day before the Chelsea game. So presumably that is Saturday. For me, I was trying to work it out. It feels like that's a long 10 days. Depends obviously when they actually arrived in Croatia, but that for me feels like a long 10 days. But hey, Sonnenberg, Vine asked about them as well, and he said that he's hoping they're fit for the next game, which I presume he means Chelsea rather than Rennes. But again, we'll find out when we're out in France. Sanchez and Romero, I think we're probably at a point where you probably have to bring them straight back in against Chelsea. It's probably harsh on Joe Rodon, but then playing Joe Rodon 3 full games in a week might be a bit much when he hasn't played that much. I put forward this theory in a piece that I wrote last night. No, today. Well, it went out today. I wrote it last night. I wonder whether there's any logic in... Because if you're not aware, Sanchez, Romero and Lo Celso out in Croatia. I think they're maybe on an island in Croatia, training away. There's a Spurs sports science staff member and a physio out there with them. I was wondering whether there's any logic to them being put through constant drills of work with the assumption that they're starting against Chelsea as a pair. I don't know how you do that, I don't know whether you bring in 2 other people to act as fullbacks. I don't know how it works, but just constantly drilling the 2 of those as a pairing so that when they come back, they can slot straight back in together to play against Chelsea. Both speak Spanish, don't they? Yeah. Gosh, one of those moments where you can't think, Argentinians and Colombians are both Spanish speaking. Obviously slightly different kinds of Spanish, of course, but on the whole, there shouldn't be any communication issues. I do wonder whether that's what they tried to go for. Which, again, very inexperienced pairing, but it's going to be whatever, I think, now without Dyer there. And again, perhaps harkens back to the decision maybe not to go and bring in another experienced kind of leader for the back. There's all these things we can look at now with after a game like that where they were kind of shown up. But yeah, as you can tell, I was not impressed. I'm hopefully heading out to France. Negative test. Oh, don't let this be where you come back and see this video where I said that. Hopefully, test allowing, I shall be heading out to Rennes to see, because I think a lot of what happens maybe on Thursday night will guide us towards what could happen on Sunday. And then, Sunday against Chelsea. Chelsea, for me, are the ones who won the transfer market. I really feel they did. I think they just needed that big, prolific striker to complete what they had, and they got in the Lukaku, and he has, because he doesn't need time to adapt. He knows what he's doing. He's come straight in and hit the ground running. And for me, Chelsea, I probably see them as potential title winners. I do, I think. And yeah, they're going to be tough on Sunday. They really are. I just hope that, combined with what happened yesterday, and if Spurs do have a bad day against Chelsea, everything doesn't suddenly turn toxic. Because like I said, Nuno's trying to build this togetherness and spirit again in the camp, and it had been going well, but you just wonder whether how fragile it is, whether the fans are maybe ready to turn already, and it could be a bit disastrous, especially then going into a North London derby and a Carabao Cup match against his old team and Wolves. It's just like, you just wonder after such a good start with the results, whether it's now set up for it to all go the other way. And I just really hope it doesn't. I hope I hope we get some players back. I hope Harry Kane finds his kind of focus again, and they just put in a performance that's very different in front of the fans. Because yesterday has to have been a blip. It has to. If that's repeated again, then it's just the fans will go absolutely bananas, and they'd have every right to be honest. A lot of questions again after yesterday. Hopefully they'll be answered in a positive way. So So I did this today because I thought, I know it's a little bit quicker than I normally put out our next video, but I just wondered whether, with what's going to be a very busy week, whether I might struggle to get one out in midweek. So yeah, so that's why you got this one today. Apologies if it's a little bit down, a little bit not the brightest, happiest video, but then, you know, probably reflected exactly what we saw yesterday. So let's see what happens next. Like I say, I'm not going to get judgy just yet. There's more of a sample size needed, going with that scientist hat on again. And then we'll see what the coming week brings us. So I'm going to head off now. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.